Well, I guess the impulse behind the exhibition of TP Flanagan's works was to explore and examine some sub-themes within his general body of work. He would be known generally as a landscape painter, a landscape artist, and particularly counties Sligo and Fermanagh and Donegal. But I was interested in looking at some of the tendencies that I noticed within his work. Everything in our culture here in the north of Ireland tends to come back to two issues. One is cultural identity, and the other is land or territory. I had noticed that somebody like Terry Flanagan, who is also of a literary mind, was teasing out and rinsing up some social issues, engaging obliquely and subtly with aspects of the political troubles here. So that was the rationale for the exhibition. In the ground floor here, we're looking at a work called an Ulster Elegy. And it's a diptych. It's a two-part painting. On the right-hand side, you see a stretch of water there with an abstract delineation of a boat. And, of course, it refers to the tragic case of a postman called William Rooney, who was frozen to death on the lake trying to deliver mail. And you'll see also a little kind of bunch of flowers there, which is a recurring motif in his work. So on one level, it's dealing with a reference to that tragedy, but it also indirectly refers to the frozen attitudes in Ulster politics. The exhibition is called Correspondences, because within his work he very often sets up a correspondence pictorially within the elements of his picture making. But also, as I have just described, you can see a correspondence in this particular diptych. Well, we're moving into another room now, and we're looking at a series here from pages from a summer diary. And in this particular one, which is in two sections, you've got an upper part where you have the impression or the imprint of a bowl, as if kind of revealed by X-ray or radar. And then you've got a more three-dimensional rendering of a bowl in the lower half. And in talking to Terry Flanagan, he is very interested in bog water or bog holes that you find in bogland. And if you've walked through bogland, the bog holes, there's a very dense colour or tone to the bog water. There's a stillness there that runs fairly deep. And Seamus Heaney has referred to that in a poem that is dedicated to TP Flanagan. It's as if you look at it's as if it's so deep that it's kind of it's dense, heavy water, dark water. And he wanted to get the same kind of stillness into this particular work. So the bowl is a kind of receptacle, like the bog hole, for stillness. And he told me when he was doing this in a studio in South Belfast, you would have the noise of the Troubles in the background. So while he was dealing with stillness in a studio, the noise from the Troubles, what Michael Longley has referred to in a poem as the stereophonic sound of the Shankill and the Falls happening in the background. And then I also, when I first saw this particular work, I kept thinking of this phenomenon called hungry grass or hungry ground. And it's an interesting kind of concept, reflecting the famine and where somebody died. They kind of mark the ground perpetually, as it were. And people have claimed they've walked over these patches of earth or grass and they become famished, And I kept thinking of this when I was looking at this particular, or examining this particular work at the beginning. And of course Terry Flanagan told me that when he was a young kid, a child, and he grew up on Lissadell Estate in County Sligo, which is associated with the Gorbooth family and W.B. Yeats. And his Aunt Elizabeth had a crocheting school there. And he remembers being chided once by some woman because he was idly stroking and hitting the grass, that was hungry grass, and that he should be more respectful. You know? That's what I mean by rinsing up that which is invested in the landscape. Well, the main painting in this particular room is called Victim. And you can see it's a reclining neoclassical figure. And it was sparked off by the murder of George McBurney in Belfast, who was a friend of the artist. And he remembers watching the coverage on television. And I think I'm right in saying that Judge McBurney was shot while he was cooking breakfast in the morning. And the television footage had him being carried out on a stretcher with a sheet over him. And one of his feet was kind of dropping to the side, as it were, exposed. And Terry Flanagan is not one to immediately to react to a political situation like that or a violent situation like that. But years afterwards, he wanted to do something in relation to it. So you get that kind of cultural time gap between the incident happening and a work evolving out of it. And he looked to the work of Nicolas Poussin, a French artist, whom he has always greatly admired. And there's a work of his called Echo and Narcissus. And essentially he started making drawings of that work with this figure lying horizontal in a landscape. And you can see here there are a number of versions of this, which tend to lead up to the final, highly edited version. The neoclassical disposition of the figure is kind of timeless, so that while it was sparked off by a particular incident, it has become universal in its outreach. I mentioned previously that he had spent a year in New York, and he became aware of a body of letters, emigrant letters, owned by a friend of his, a botanist friend called Norman Carruthers, who lived here in Belfast. He was a botanist. He had a collection of letters. And he started to become interested in their sentiment, and also in their material properties, their script and so forth. So these people would, quite suddenly on occasions, emigrate, and they would write back explaining the arduous journey that they had and what the new country was like, and often asking for seeds to be sent over so that they could plant something which reminded them of home. And the seeds were often sent within the creases and folds of the letter. So after a long journey of whatever, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, however long it took to cross the Atlantic, the material properties of the seeds would start to stain the letters. And you can see in this range of letters that he has recorded some of the kind of the biohistory of the letter on his journey with these little plant seeds in it. And in many ways, the exhibition as a whole is held together by concepts such as loss, nostalgia, certainly in these works, and by the dignity of silence that we saw in The Bowl and in Victim. So in all of these works, I should say, while they do deal with social and political issues subtly and indirectly, they're also concerned with painterly properties, painterly concerns. So the idea then was to bring these range of sub-themes together, some of them being seen for the first time in these sequences, and to celebrate, I guess, Terry Flanagan's birthday, and also the fact that he's being given an honorary degree by the University of Ulster.